Hello and welcome to our revamped Lunchtime Lives from Epilepsy Action. My name's John, and today we're going to be talking about parents with epilepsy and their children and how that all goes for them. Please do bear with us, and if you do have any feedback for us, do tell us. We're hoping to be live for about half an hour today, and we're being joined by Karl Bates, who has joined us. Karl is, many people may know, the voice of Millwall. So before we get into epilepsy, Karl, any transfer exclusives you want to drop for us?
No, I'm afraid my life isn't worth doing if I did that. So no, we'll keep that strictly between me and my ears.
Okay, no problem at all there then. We wanted to start off today with just a bit of a starting story about your journey with epilepsy, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just trying to
into your sort of role as being a dad and how that's gone for you as well.
Yeah, if you could just give me one moment to set this up. So by all means, if you carry on for a second,
no problem.
And I'll just try and get the right levels here, which it doesn't seem to be playing any favours. So
no problem.
I do apologise for me jumping all over the place.
No issues at all there. So just while we've got the camera on me, to let everybody know, we are setting up a new support group for parents in September. So information about that will be available after this live. So anybody who's got epilepsy and children, welcome to join that group. And obviously this is an important area for us. We want to hear your stories. So please do put your stories into the chat for this, and we'll pick up those stories and questions as we go today. Technical gremlin sorted, Karl? Are you good to go?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you.
So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you everybody for joining. My name's Karl Bates, as I've just been very kindly introduced. I'm a football commentator at the moment for Millwall and BBC London, and I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was 23 years old. I'm 47 now. I know it's hard to believe, but and it was a real shot in the dark. It just a bolt from the blue, really. When I had my first seizure, I was at my mother-in-law's, just having a cup of coffee, and bizarrely, it's quite actually a funny story, but bear with me on this. My wife was having a photo taken with her sisters, and she's got a couple of teenage sisters, very grumpy, didn't want to have their picture taken, and I was behind the cameraman, so you've got everybody in front, I'm behind the cameraman, and I started pulling funny faces to try and make them laugh. And at some point, I pulled a very funny face and started having my first seizure. I'd love to know when they thought, I don't think he's putting that one on. Something's not right here. And then started to fit. Thankfully, my mother-in-law was sat next to me, and they called the ambulance. They came out and took me to Addenbrooke's. For myself and for anybody who's epileptic that is listening in, it's a feeling it's really hard to describe, because you suddenly go from everything's normal, just sitting there having a coffee, and now I'm in hospital, my wife's crying, I've got things on my brain, I've got a doctor trying to explain things to me, I'm flicking in and out of consciousness, I've no idea what's going on, nothing at all. And even though I was 23 years old, you suddenly feel like a child again. I was absolutely petrified. No idea what was going on. The neurologist was great on the day, talked me through what had happened. But I think one of the things that surprised me was the sort of aftercare side of things. I mean, there's great charities like Epilepsy Action and various others as well, but you don't really know about them. I had my seizure, and then it was, well, that could easily be a one-off caused by pretty much everything. If you have another, come back and, we'll take it from there, which was... I haven't hurt my toe. We don't need to check if it bruises. I've had a seizure. What on earth am I doing? I was so scared. And this is where I think you could do with maybe a pamphlet or something, just a little bit of aftercare if you're worried. Talk to this charity, talk to that charity. And I found that very hard to reach out to people. Didn't know that, what was available to me. I lost my driving license, as I'm sure people aware. I live out in the Fens, so I'm in a little tiny village where there's there's a bus every other Thursday. So really worrying and upsetting times, because you lose everything that you just take for granted. And you know, I was worried I was always going to have another seizure. Every time I felt slightly ill, I'd be paranoid. Oh my God, am I going to have a fit? And I was struggling to sleep, struggling to eat, and then it's just that knock-on effect. It's that rolling effect, and you can't get away from that. And it took a really long time for me to get my head around what had happened. And it's not just me as well. It's my family. You know, my wife became naturally very scared. Eventually, I started having daytime seizures, and they eventually, after medication, moved into nighttime seizures. I take now sodium valproate 700 milligrams in the morning, along with lamotrigine 50 milligrams, and then I take the same in the evening. Oh, little tip, by the way, just something that I do. I always text my wife to let her know, even if she sat next to me, I will still text. I didn't mean to point at a donkey when I said my wife. Apologies. Yeah, she's not here. I'm okay. Yeah, so I'd always text her just so we've got the message. Because if you take tablets every day, then you're always you might forget sometimes. So that is something that I've had to do. And I just think it's a handy tip, really. But one of the things with epilepsy, as I said, that effect on your family. When I started having nighttime seizures, I really struggled, and so did my wife, because I'd go to sleep and she wouldn't, because she was worried I'd have a seizure. I naturally fidget in bed, so every time I moved, she'd be, oh, is he having a seizure? What's going on? And you know, she would then struggle to sleep, and then it's that knock-on effect. And you know, this happened, as I say, when I was 23. We now have a 13-year-old son who very kindly has just tiptoed past us over there as he's just coming from his friends. And you know, and I had to explain to him what it was like to have a dad that had epilepsy, because children naturally presume that mummy and daddy are Superman and Wonder Woman. And you know, it's easy to believe that. And so I had to sit down with a 6-year-old boy and explain to him what epilepsy was and how to explain it to him. I mean, he was roughly this age at the time. I'll just show you a little picture of him. So there you go, with that eyebrow that you can raise. You can do both, actually. But so I had to explain to him, and it was horrible having to sit him down and go through what epilepsy was, and just sit, cuddle him, explain, look, I have epilepsy. This is what can happen. This is what you need to do if I have a seizure. And it's not surprising that he cried at the time. We both did, to be fair. But once he pulled himself together, you know, he's an incredibly brave child. He said, right, Daddy, I'll look after you. What do we need to do? And so we made a game called Epilepsy. Probably should have thought of a better game. That really is a poor name for it. But what we did was we put some music on. We'd dance around like idiots. Obviously, I can still bust some shapes. And well, the fact that I've called it that probably means I can't. But anyway, we'd dance, we'd mess around, and then we'd suddenly stop and I'd go, oh no, somebody doesn't feel well. I think I'm having a seizure. And then I'd lie on the floor and pretend to fit. And then but I'd keep one eye open, and he'd move around and do what he needed to do, that what we'd gone through. And so he would put a pillow under my head. He'd then pretend to ring the ambulance. He'd explain they need to go to the back door because that's where the patio doors are. He would make sure that I could breathe okay. Just little things like that. And we decided that, and we did that to start off with every week. Then it was every couple of weeks, every month, every 6 months. And now, as I said, he's 13 now. He knows exactly what to do if I had a seizure. And so I'm very proud of him for that, to take that on. And yeah, as I said, as a 6-year-old, that would have been a big, big thing to, you know, to try and comprehend. I mean, I haven't had a seizure in front of him. He's never been needed, but I know that he could step up if necessary. By the way, if there's any questions at all, throw them at me.
We've got a few coming in, but I think it's nice to hear this, because it does tie your whole story together. So one of the things I was going to ask you actually is, you obviously had that 3-year period between when you found out epilepsy and having a child. Mm-hmm. One of the things we've heard from people is about family planning, particularly when they've had any issues with familial epilepsy. Mm-hmm. Was that anything that you discussed with your partner in terms of how you felt about that as a potential dad?
It was definitely something that was mentioned. I mean, my dad did have seizures when he was a teenager, but my dad's very different to me. It's a generational thing. I don't hold it against him personally, but he's very much stiff upper lip. If you know, when I had my first seizure, he came to the hospital, and I knew he'd had seizures, so I wanted to talk to him about it. But he was very much, yep, I had seizures. Yep, I'm all right now. And that was all. It was just a brick wall. Don't want to open up the emotions, you know, stiff upper lip, get on with it, leave me alone. And that's all I got. I know, as you can tell by the fact I'm talking to yourselves today, I'm an open book. And if Ed does end up with epilepsy, then I know that he'll be okay to talk to me 24/7 about everything and anything. It's unlikely, but if it happens, then so be it. It's something that we'll deal with. But I don't think that was ever going to stop me and my wife becoming parents. It's something we've always wanted to be. And, you know, I like to go along the lines of epilepsy. It's a condition I live with. It's not a disability I suffer from. But that's me personally. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. That's just a little thing that sits up here and helps me to achieve what I do. So, yeah. So hopefully that's helped the answer. Yeah, it's definitely discussed. But we wanted to work on the premise that we'll deal with it if it happens, more than worry, and it may never have happened. So, yeah, we wanted Ed in our lives, and don't get me wrong, he's 13 now, he's a teenager, sometimes we don't. But no, he's a really good kid.
Another thing I wanted to ask you was just around epilepsy triggers. So I'm a young dad myself. I say I'm a young dad. I've got young children, I'm not a young dad. But we found obviously the first couple of years is incredibly different to what you were doing before. You've got lack of sleep, you know, all kinds of things being demanded of you, and that's I've only got a 4 and a 2-year-old, so you've gone through all of that up to 13. So were there any particular periods prior to your son being 6 where your epilepsy you felt influenced your experience of being a parent?
Well, at the time I was having the odd nighttime seizure, nothing major. I'd had a couple in my sleep. A lot of them were, I suppose, what were perceived by a neurologist as minor ones, as in curling up a bit, almost grunting, swallowing rapidly. He said these are common signs of a nighttime seizure. And the last one would have been before we actually had it. We were trying. Unfortunately, we had a couple of miscarriages. And because I had a seizure, I think it was a nighttime one, around the age of when Ed was 4 or 5, we felt that he needed to know. And we felt at the age of 6, he's quite a mature child. So we felt that was the right time to tell him. Any earlier than that, I think, would have been non-beneficial to him. I think that would have scared more than benefited him. But we thought, if I'm going to have a seizure, he needs to know. It's going to be a scary situation. If he doesn't know what's going on, then that's beyond comprehension, I'm sure. Yeah,
absolutely. So you mentioned that your son hasn't seen you have a seizure at this point.
No.
Is there anything, obviously you've done the epilepsy game to sort of try and prepare him for that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you're worried about in relation to that first time? Anything that you would like to, if you had a magic wand, fix before it happens?
I don't know. I mean, he could do with travelling on the train with me. I've seen on the train, I've seen about 5 or 6 people have seizures, 2 or 3 people have strokes. So, yeah, but if you ever spot me on the train, go somewhere else, because something's going to happen pretty quick. So I suppose almost watching it with somebody else, or maybe going on a first aid course so that he can live it without it being his dad. So sort of go through those stages and see it happening for real, but not for real, if that makes sense. So he sees it happening perhaps on a video during a first aid course, or goes through the whole system with a stranger. I think the emotional impact would be less than if it was actually his dad in the moment. He'd know what to do, but obviously that's a heightened anxiety level compared to going through it stages, perhaps at school. I have reached out to his school to say I'm happy to come in and talk to teachers or students in regards to this, and have done so at other places. For example, something I'll come on to later with my football work.
Excellent. Okay. We've got a first question from the audience we wanted to ask you as we go, as I said. So do you know what your seizure triggers are? Is there anything that you're aware of that does trigger your seizures?
I don't. No, it's frustrating, I must admit. I fall into the idiopathic section. Basically, for me, I've had seizures when I've been perfectly fine, no stress levels at all, and have had a seizure. I've had them at varying different times during the day. It hasn't been sort of last thing at night after a long day at work or anything like that. It has been very much, I mean, I've been really, really stressed. It's quite a stressful time at the moment. I don't mean talking to yourselves, obviously, but and there's been times when I've been really stressed out, not stressed out, and yeah, I've no idea what my trigger is. So it, like I said, it's frustrating. I mean, if, for example, it was photosensitive epilepsy, then, you know, life's still not great, but it's a lot simpler. But no, I don't fall into that small percentage. So no idea at all, unfortunately.
Let's move on to interaction with other parents and other children. I know when we've spoken previously, you've spoken about some of your wider work in terms of making sure that people with epilepsy aren't excluded from things like sports camps and that sort of thing. So can you tell me a little bit about you know, what you've learned as a person with epilepsy in society and interacting with people?
I think the most not disappointing, because let's face it, when I have a seizure, I'm not looking my best, you know, and so I think because of that embarrassment factor, people struggle to talk about it, which is totally understandable. When I've had seizures in the past, you're obviously very aware of what people have seen, and whenever I've done these sort of talks before, a lot of the time people have spoken to me afterwards, not in an open sort of realm, shall we say, and they've spoke to me quietly, like, I'm epileptic, but I don't want my boss to know, I don't want my friends to know. I did a talk in Birmingham, and a girl came and spoke to me afterwards. She'd been with her other half over a year and still hadn't told him she had epilepsy because she was worried that he wouldn't go out with her anymore, and it was starting to get serious. So it's heartbreaking when you hear things like that. And I think because we don't talk about epilepsy enough, people still believe in the old wives' tales. You know, we need to put a spoon in their mouth or they'll swallow their tongue. You know, and you just think, really, I had a first aider do that once. A first aider, really confident. Yep, I know what to do. And it's like, no, trust me, you have no idea. But because people don't talk about it, I mean, look, perfect example, diabetes. People talk about diabetes, you know, if I was making a cup of coffee and somebody said, oh, no, I can't have a sugar, I'm diabetic, people just go, no, fair enough. So did you see the football last night? Never mentioned at all. While if you were you were next to them and you said, oh, I need to take my epilepsy tablets. Oh, just give us a water. People suddenly pay attention. They say, well, he's epileptic. What do? I've seen people literally retract on you when you say you're epileptic. And again, it's because people don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about it openly enough. And I've had problems before, for example, with football clubs. I think I worked with yourselves on that over at Reading, when they weren't allowing a child to participate purely because he was epileptic. He would have to have his parent there. He wasn't allowed to a summer camp. He wasn't allowed this. Thankfully, with the work I do, I know professional footballers that are epileptic, and we all had to pile in on them basically and say, what you're doing is clear discrimination. We have professional footballers that are playing within the championship in Leagues 1, League 2. You know, Jay Bothroyd, for example, has played at an incredibly high level. With epilepsy, you're being unfair to this kid. And we worked with the parents and finally got it over the line, and he was allowed to join in and play with his friends during the summer camp. So, and it was all it was just they weren't educated. They didn't understand, and they presumed that if he played football and headed the ball, for example, guess what? So, yeah, it's talking. Just, yeah, being as open as I am at the moment, and just I'll talk to everybody in the entire world if necessary, to explain that, you know, unless I'm having a seizure, I'm exactly the same as you.
I was going to ask you actually if you could give one piece of information, but you may have summarised it there right at the end, which is, if I've got epilepsy, I'm absolutely the same as you. And I think, like you say, we get lots of stories about people recoiling and not quite knowing what epilepsy is. And I was really touched by the moment you mentioned just there about, you know, it would be great if your son, before he sees you have your first seizure, because that'll happen at some point inevitably, can see that in a more wider context. It takes the emotion out of it. And I think for a lot of people, we know that story you just told us there about the lady who worried about her partner potentially not wanting to be with her anymore because of the epilepsy. They feel that lack of understanding creates anxiety for themselves, understandably. So that's really interesting.
Well, just quickly following on from that, you mentioned there about the anxiety side of things. Oh, it's just gone from my head. I had it, and then I saw a comment at the bottom with somebody, and it's just totally gone from my head. It will come back to me, I'm sure. So, sorry, carry on.
So do you want me to ask you some more questions before that will come back into
No,
your head then?
no. Yeah, no, you carry on.
Yeah, no problem. That's fine. So the other thing I was going to ask you about was interaction with the parents.
Mm-hmm.
So do other parents who are the parents of your son's friends know about your epilepsy? Do they ask you questions about it? Any kind of interactions you've had that have been interesting?
Yeah, no, my friends, like Ed's parents, they all know that I'm epileptic. They know that I do this kind of work. It's something I'm immensely proud of, and there's nothing to be ashamed of being epileptic. It's just the card I was dealt. Some people are, some people aren't. And no, I've been open with them. I don't, walk around with a big, sort of lanyard or anything like that to say I'm epileptic, but they know the work I do. I promote it across various social media networks and talking at various, I've done for Epilepsy Action before at various conferences and schools and various others. So no, everybody that knows me vaguely well knows, if that makes sense. But just in regards to epilepsy, I saw somebody make a comment across the bottom. I thought it was a very good one. In regards letting people know, I let them know me first, as in Karl, give it a couple of weeks and then explain I'm Karl with epilepsy, because otherwise people get a preconceived idea that an epileptic is coming in, and they then suddenly think, well, epilepsy, and they're treating you differently and they've never met you. And I think one of those ideas, and it's come back to me now, is the perception on television. I get on my soapbox immediately. My wife just goes, oh, here he goes again. But it's the problem of, say, for example, Holby City or Grey's Anatomy. You'll see somebody by the roadside doing an operation, doing some sort of brain surgery with a knife and fork they've found, not a problem. And then they'll bring them into the hospital. They'll have them linked up to loads of machinery. There'll be beeps and left, right and centre. And suddenly they'll have an incredibly dramatic seizure. Everybody forgets all their training and starts running around like lunatics, and the person's going to die. Aren't they going to die? Are they going to die? And then people naturally presume, epileptic. That's what it means. It's a life or death situation. So somebody has a seizure. Oh my God, this is it. They're going to die on me. What am I going to do? And it's no. It should be explained better. It was the car accident. Remember, knife and fork an hour ago? But, and people, I think, then get the misconception that an epileptic fit is always life and death, when thankfully it very rarely is.
Yes, I really understand what you're saying there. One of the things we're doing as part of our strategy really is looking at how epilepsy is portrayed in television. Because, like you say, I think I worked out the other day, across the 3 main soap operas in this country, there's 238 permanent cast members, of which one person's got epilepsy. And the only seizure that they seem to have had in the recent past has been widely slammed on social media as just being exactly all the things you've just described.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do need a much stronger, realistic presentation of what epilepsy looks like in public culture. Start to do some of the knowledge building you've been talking about. So yeah, really interesting.
I think so.
I'm just going to refer back to my phone again here just to get these questions across.
No, that's fine.
Obviously, I did say we're using new technology today. Not all of it is fully functioning, which is why we're going to do 2 things at once.
Oh, right, okay.
So the next question I've got is, you mentioned that you didn't have seizure triggers, but do you get any warnings at all? And anything in terms of, your day-to-day that make you think maybe a seizure is coming?
I've had an absent seizure. I've had a couple of them before, and I suppose, vaguely feel them coming on, as in can get very confused, not quite sure what I'm doing. And then afterwards, it's almost as if I've woken up from a really deep sleep. Luckily, I suppose I've been talking to my wife at the time, and I've just sort of curled up, gone, and then sort of come round again. And I've felt them a little bit beforehand, and then afterwards, once you've fully come around, you sort of think, yeah, there wasn't something right there. But as for an actual tonic-clonic seizure, then no ifs, buts, maybes, just straight, then that's that. So
yeah. Obviously, going back to your story about the epilepsy game you mentioned earlier on, that seems like a really good tip people could potentially take away and utilise themselves. Is there anything else you could tell us about that first conversation in terms of the tonality of it? Obviously, I think it's really great for you to talk about the fact that you openly cried with your son. Like you say, a lot of dads might not feel that comfortable in doing that. Is there anything else you can tell us about how to frame that conversation, how to make it really good for everybody?
I thought the idea was to be open, answer all questions. I thought it was best to get at eye level as well. So you're talking to somebody personally more than talking down or at a distance. So we sat, fairly close to, like me and the donkeys, for example, but facing each other, obviously. And just spoke softly, explained what was happening, but explained it in I suppose it sounds a bit daft, in a human way, not in I have tonic-clonic seizures, I've had this amount of seizures, this is what you need to do, here's a hit list, I'll test you in the morning. So just slowly, talking over as many questions as he wanted to ask and making sure that there was time for it. There was only me and him in the house. My wife had gone shop. I knew she wasn't going to be back for an hour and a half or so. And so we could talk it all through. He could, we didn't have anything planned in the diary, and let him ask as many questions as he wanted. And just to be there, we're quite a, I suppose, emotional, touchy-feely family. We like to cuddle each other and, let everybody know we're okay. I think that's important, not to be distant. That's something that I have with my dad, for example. If he come up and cuddled me, that would be one of the weirdest things that's ever happened. There's nothing wrong with him, but it's just, like I said, it's a generation thing. And so, he feels sometimes if he's feeling down or worried about anything, he'll just come up, chat and cuddle. And I think when you start talking about something that seriously at such a young age, it opens the door to be able to do that. If him at the age of 6, we can have a chat about epilepsy and a condition that I live with, then that's going to make it far easier to talk about other things like, I don't know, I've got a crush on a girl, or I'm struggling at school, or this, that, and the other. It's opened a door. So if he has any questions about epilepsy, which he does every now and again, if he sees something on the telly or just generally, then it's an easy, it's an easy option or an easy discussion point. It's nothing taboo or nothing he has to worry about.
So it sounds as though, without putting words in your mouth there, that your epilepsy, rather than making your relationship more complicated, is actually giving opportunities to build further understanding of each other and strengthen your relationship.
Yeah, I mean, he knows, for example, I do talks like this and he'll ask questions afterwards, as I'm sure he will today, just about how did it go, what did people say, and he's interested, he'll want to know what other people, what other people, how they deal with epilepsy. So, it's an open, honest discussion. He'll sometimes chase me up, have you took your tablets, and various things like that. So, it's definitely a bond that's brought us together. It's not something that is, I don't know, as I said, something we don't talk about. It's something, no, dear, don't talk about that. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, just leave me alone. But, we're lucky we talk about pretty much everything in that way. So epilepsy is just another to add to the list.
Yeah. Has the more scientific side of epilepsy become more interesting to him as he's got older, or are you still more interested in the social aspects of epilepsy at this stage?
From a scientific point of view, he's, I suppose, not bothered particularly. It's just a case of what do we need to do if you have a seizure, more than what do we have to do if society has a seizure, or what medical breakthroughs are happening at the moment. He's not too fussed in that sense.
Yeah. Not that surprising, I suppose. I think, when you're at that age, I'd imagine there's many more things that are very much front and center of your mind. I'm just looking through the phone here. I can't see many of the questions that have come across just now. I suppose what I was going to ask you is just a final thought, really, is obviously we've got people on here today who are parents with epilepsy. Is there anything you could say to them in terms of a top tip to take away in terms of living their best life they can as a parent with epilepsy?
I mean, I suppose for me, I got to the point where I decided I'm not going to allow epilepsy to rule me, and I want to still be able to do various things. I wanted to get into radio in some point, so started doing hospital radio, Worked from there, went up to Boundary Sound, which was a local radio station, did bits and bobs and kept picking up and then now doing football commentary, which is brilliant as a football fan. You know, I'm very happy and proud to do such a thing. It's a great job that, you know, I do for nothing. I've been on Countdown, won that 3 times. But every time I've done these sort of things, I've always made sure that I can promote epilepsy. And for example, on Countdown, and anybody that's watched it, at the start, they'll obviously talk to the contestant. And so I said beforehand, can we just say, oh, Karl, I know you're epileptic, etc., etc. So we spoke about epilepsy, and it was great because it's live on television. You're showing to people that somebody with epilepsy is working in a pressure situation. They can use their brain just as quickly as everybody else. Same with football commentary. Millwall, which is the team I work for, have been fantastic. They've wore epilepsy action t-shirts, some of the players, before games. They've allowed me to go in and talk to the youth academy, the under 21s, explaining to them what it's like to have seizures, and they'll help me in whatever way they can. I could ring them up today and say, look, can we do this, that and the other? That'll probably be on social media by tomorrow. So very lucky with that situation as well. I've even done stand-up comedy for a bit. It's quite funny mentioning that you're epileptic and watching the front 2 rows sort of back off a touch. Yeah, so I've again done that. Just bring it in. Not particularly, there's nothing funny about it particularly, but I'll always bring it up and then just do that sort of little joke. But again, just showing epileptic in front of, I did the Comedy Store once, so about 350 people. It's just getting it out there, taking away, I suppose, trying to take away the stigma. Because if people know you and then find out you've got epilepsy, I think if you talk about it, from what the people I've encountered when I've spoken about epilepsy, because I'm talking to them, they're happy to talk to you. If I mention I'm epileptic and then shut up shop, like, you know, oh, sorry, I can't do, say, for example, you had photosensitive epilepsy, you said, well, sorry, I can't do that. I've got photosensitive epilepsy. I can't watch this film at the cinema. Then if you just then sort of walk away from the subject, they might not feel they can talk to you. While if you say, oh, I've got this, I was diagnosed, I was this, they might then ask a question. And then slowly but steadily, it's not a problem. You're talking about it regularly. So it's not easy, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it was, you know, an absolute walk in the park when I first spoke to people explaining I had epilepsy. But the more I've spoken about it, the far easier it is, and people are far happier to talk to me. So if you're brave enough, or, you know, I don't know if brave's the right word, but if you can open up about it, then I've always found that beneficial anyway. Right. So hopefully that helps.
That's really helpful. As ever, as soon as we've said we're going to start wrapping up, we do get a couple of additional questions. As long as you're okay for another 5 minutes.
I am fine for as long as people want to ask questions.
Is that okay? Fabulous.
Yeah.
So the first thing we're going to ask is, obviously, you know, you'd be very, very modest about it, but you've achieved an awful lot in your life, and you've obviously learned an awful lot on that journey. Is there anything that epilepsy specifically has taught you?
I think it teaches you that you're more, you're stronger than you think you are. I think that's definitely something. You know, if you'd have said to me, I won't reel off, okay, right, very briefly, if you'd have told me when I was 10 that I would live through my parents divorcing when I was 10, mum remarrying, mum unfortunately passing away through cancer when I was 17, having issues with my stepfather sadly being kicked out, then becoming epileptic, etc., etc., you'd think, wow, I could never deal with any of that. That would completely finish me. And with epilepsy, irrespective of your story before that, that is something that you would probably never believe you could live with. You know, it would scare the life out of you if somebody said, oh, tomorrow you're going to be diagnosed with epilepsy. It's going to be a condition you're going to live with for the rest of your life. You'd think, I couldn't handle that. There's not a chance in this life or the next I could live with that. But you somehow pick yourself up off the floor and you do. You know, as I mentioned, when I first had a seizure, petrified, couldn't leave the house, literally was having panic attacks, was almost in a mother-son relationship with my wife because I was so scared. It was like, am I going to be okay? What about this? Well, I don't feel well. Well, I'm quite tired. I haven't slept for a while. Have I eaten enough? Or have I taken my tablets? What am I doing? And I was just doing that the whole time. It was just spiraling out of control. And I was having to say, am I okay? Am I okay? Am I okay? And I went from that to where we are. And I think it makes you a far stronger person than you were. And, you know, everybody who's epileptic should be proud of the fact that whatever you achieve, it's with epilepsy. Other people don't achieve half as much as we do, because we're living with a condition that does affect our lives, but yeah, hopefully not as much as it can. So
that's a really good and inspirational answer. I really like that one. Another question we've had through from somebody is saying that sometimes they feel worried about being around their child on their own. Have you got any thoughts or opinion on that?
I mean, for me personally, I felt the age of 6 was the right time to tell my son. For some people, I obviously don't know your children. It could be earlier, could be maybe slightly later. I felt, I must admit, sometimes you do feel a little bit worried about what to do. I know that Ed would be able to handle the situation. I know it would be a big, I suppose, issue to deal with. And I know that he would afterwards probably need maybe some sort of counselling, or maybe to sit with me and Sally for a long time and talk through what's happened, how well he's done, etc., etc. And it was scary to start off with when I was just with Ed. I hadn't had a seizure that long before being left alone with him. And we sort of, without talking about it directly, me and Sally, my wife, we left it maybe half an hour, then an hour, just so I could get the confidence in myself that no. And then eventually it was like, no, we need to do this. We cannot tiptoe around something that may never happen again. And that's the thing with epilepsy. It's really hard. It's almost like being, I don't know, Gamblers Anonymous or an alcoholic. You can be forever an alcoholic and never touch a drink again. And I think that's the same with epilepsy. I'm epileptic. I may be lucky and never have a seizure again, but you've got to live with the fact you just might. And so, yeah, it can be hard, but you've just got to go. You've got to work on the theory that the last one was my last one. And if not, then you just wipe the slate clean and off you go again.
It's a really nice way of looking at it. I like that. The last question I think we're going to do today, and for anybody who has asked questions, because there's quite a few now, and if we did do all of them, we'd probably be here for the rest of the day. We do need to wrap up. Do you have anything that you wear that tells you about the fact that you've got epilepsy if someone finds you anywhere?
Oh God, you've caught me on there. I've lost my epilepsy action one, so you need to send me one. Exactly. I've got my purple sort of can-do armband. That's what I wear personally. And I think it's a good idea, because if you're not confident enough to tell people you're epileptic, if somebody asks, you could say, I'm wearing this in support of a friend of mine. But if you were by yourself and had a seizure, somebody might spot that, and then they wouldn't be as panicky about the situation, because they may put 2 and 2 together and think, right, this person is epileptic. This is something that has happened to them before. Therefore, I should be okay to handle this situation. I think that's why I wear, I mean, it doesn't bother me, but I think that's maybe why it's a good idea to wear perhaps something like that, because then you don't have to, if you don't want to admit to that person you're epileptic, but a stranger helping you at the time, that could just help lower their stress levels a bit.
Perfect. And as we've got a little bit more time left, I know this will be the
don't worry. Like I said, I've booked off the afternoon. You can just fire away.
Part of the problem I've got is that there's so many good ones in here. I don't want to answer so many and end up leaving one person by accident.
Okay.
But the question we wanted to ask was around, you mentioned some of the work you've done in schools and in local communities. Is there any tips you can give to any parents if they want to be that really powerful epilepsy ambassador in their community, in terms of how they can get that to happen?
I would say, I mean, something that I did was a little bit of research. To be fair, you guys helped as well, just about how common the condition is. I think it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have over 600,000 people in the UK that live with the condition. I think it's just under 100 are diagnosed every day with epilepsy. And, you know, when you're using those sort of figures, and if you're, you know, they're almost a good opener to explain, you know, this isn't, you know, something that people don't, isn't as common as you think. It's actually far more common than you think. And I mean, especially with children, I mean, absent seizures are so important to spot with children, because if a child's in a class and they have an absent seizure, they may be doing the 2 times tables, that 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 2 is 6, 4 times 2, and then have an absent seizure, and then they hear 16, they're going to be, hang on a second, and then they put their hand up for the answer and they're completely wrong. And the teacher's going to be, well, hang on a second, that kid's daydreaming, or that kid hasn't listened properly. They're not as clever as the other children. We maybe have to put them down a set. And so, you know, teachers knowing, or even other kids knowing, just triggers, just the more people that know, the more help people can get. And so in regards, I would be quite, I don't think persuasive, I'd be quite, what's the word I'm looking for? To keep knocking the door. I can't think of the word, persistent.
Persistent.
Yeah, relentless, persistent. You know, you may well get an answer, and it may well be in good faith, like, yes, that sounds like a great idea, we'll get back to you. If they don't, you know, just knock the door again in a couple of weeks. Oh, I spoke to yourself a couple of weeks ago, let's do this, let's do that. Whatever your idea is, using charities like Epilepsy Action are always on hand to help. And yeah, once you can get in the door, people are nothing but fascinated with epilepsy because so few people talk about it. I mean, I've done these talks to everybody and anybody, and not once have I not had an audience gripped because no one talks about it. They're naturally, wow, so that happens. It's that common and that many people. And yep. And you think about the amount of people that you work with in day-to-day life, whichever company you work for, when you look at the statistics, it's 1 in every 100 and something are epileptic. That means that somebody within, you know, statistically, somebody you work with is epileptic. There's a very, very good chance, or you bump into somebody, you know, when you're at a train station, for example, there'll be, you know, if you're in a busy London train station, there'll be 50, 60 people walking past you with epilepsy every 10, 15 minutes. It's that common, and we need to talk about it more.
I think that's probably one of the key messages that I've taken away from today is just by talking about it, we can demystify, and by demystifying, we can make people better understand the condition, just like they do many other health conditions in this country. Mm-hmm. So, Karl, thank you ever so much for your time. I think you've spoken really eloquently about your experiences, both as a person who epilepsy and father, and that's been really inspirational. I think lots of the people you can see in the comments.
I hope so.
Just a reminder again, please do give us feedback to this new format. We want to hear from you in terms of what you like and don't like about this. And also, we do have this new parents group setting up in September, which is a virtual group. So no matter where you are in the country, you can join that group and you know, hear from each other about all the challenges and opportunities you have with epilepsy as a parent.
And just one final thing. I must admit, I don't use Instagram that often. If anybody wants to get in contact with me personally and ask a question, I'm on Twitter. My name is Karl with a K, Bates. By all means, you know, send me a message. I'm more than happy to answer anything. So if your question didn't get answered, head over to Twitter, ask me a question, and I'm more than happy to answer. Okay, so hope that helps.
Thank you very much. That's very, very kind of you. So we'll leave it there, folks. Thank you very much. This is obviously a recording as well, so you can see it on our Instagram feed if you want to watch it back. So thanks very much, and bye-bye.